Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being with us today. My name is Sarah. I work for Geospatial Media and Communications. I will be your host for the next 1 hour. Today, we have a session on creating drone ecosystem for defense and security. We have very lucky to have two speakers from eminent security agency with us today. Our first speaker is Mr. Jerry Akubo. He is the National Technical Officer from Interpol and CB Abuja from Nigeria. Hi, Jerry.
Hi, how you doing?
Oh, good. Thank you for being with us.
So good to be here live.
Our second speaker is Mr. CRISTIAN. He is the senior scientist from NATO's Communications and Information Agency based in The Hague, the Netherlands. Hi, CRISTIAN.
Hi, Sarah. Hi, good afternoon, good morning, everyone.
So good to have both of you here. Each speaker will be speaking for 20 minutes, and we will have a short Q&A session at the end of the webinar. And for all audience, I can see that many of you have started to introduce yourself in the chat box. Thank you. In case at any point during the presentation, if you have a question for our speakers, please feel free to type your question on the chat box. We will take them up at the end of the session.
Okay, thank you so very much for giving me the opportunity to be on this platform at this point in time. My regards to everyone on this platform from around the world. My name, as you can see on the screen, is Jerry Akubo. I'm currently the National Technical Officer for Interpol NCB Abuja, and also a member of the Interpol Drone Expert Forum. I'm also the CEO and founder of Technology Against Crime in Africa. That's an NGO, and also the Chief Operating Officer for the Institute for Remotely Piloted Aircraft System in Nigeria, which is a new initiative which is being set up in collaboration with the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority to help in synchronizing drone operations at a national level for law enforcement agency, along as other agencies within the country. If you can see by the right, you can see a logo of the NCB Abuja. NCB stands for National Central Bureau Abuja. All Interpol member countries Interpol has 194 member countries presently, and each country has what we call an NCB, that's a National Central Bureau, that act as liaison between Interpol and the country itself. It also acts as liaison for extending the relevant Interpol databases to all law enforcement agencies. Recently, Interpol set up among its databases a set of drone platform that's drone. It's called the Interpol Drone Initiative, which highlights the Interpol drone paradigm and encourages member countries to utilize drone operations for its day-to-day usage and operation, and to also encourage a national integration of drone at the national level. If you look at the right, you see a logo of Technology Against Crime in Africa. It's also an NGO that geared towards making sure that law enforcement organization uses emerging technologies to cope technologically emerging crime. Next, I will go direct to the point. Most of my session, which I've held around the world in places like Singapore at the Interpol Forum, we have a forum called the Interpol World. We also have forums called the General Assembly, held in different countries. And in all these assemblies, I've also spoken about drone usage and how it could be integrated for law enforcement usage within the country. First, I start by asking this question: why unmanned drone? Essentially, a lot of people connote drone, quote and unquote, with not too good, they connote drone with strike, with war, with negative platforms, such that even the regulatory agencies are thinking of automatically changing this name. And they've already changed it. There's already a nomenclature that's been used in several areas. Instead of using drone, prefer to use RPAS, remotely piloted aircraft system, or unmanned aerial systems, or depending on the regions, there are different names for these. But for me, I say drone for short stands for dynamically remotely navigated operation equipment. And drone per se can be an operation in the sky. It can be operated in the sea. That's why you have an unmanned vessel. It can be even operated in the desert where you have an unmanned vehicle. Okay, these are all platforms in which drone could coexist. And when we mean unmanned to an extent, and why this should also be considered in the ecosystem for defense and security, is because it is safer in all deployment. Most of the times, it is easier for you to set up drone platforms, deploy it. Why? Because you have less risk, and essentially there is no pilot. So overall, the risk of deploying a drone cannot be overemphasized. So much so that it is automated. So from a command and control center, you can deploy your drone remotely and still monitor what's happening at all points in time, the usability and the platform. And that's why I always hinge on why drone. Why drone? Because drones are smaller, they are becoming cheaper, they are becoming integratable to day-to-day activities of law enforcement agencies. And as such, an ecosystem needs to be built around drones such that it will be utilized to the fullest minimum, especially for law enforcement operations. If you look at the next point, I say, but UAS are complex and integrated systems. That's unmanned area systems. Why? Because there are core things that you need to consider when setting up a drone ecosystem. One, the quality of data link is key. Why is this key? Because most times you call this an unmanned system and you deploy it remotely so you can get information from a remote location. But then without data, without quality data, without active data, without usable data, there's no way you can get a full view of what you intend saying. Then essentially, when you look at a visual line of sight where you deploy drone in an extent whereby you can see the drone while operating it, and then you also have beyond visual line of sight. These are situations where you can deploy a drone from one region to another, from one country to another, from a remote command and control center. But all these have different requirements and different operability and how they work. If you look down below my slide, you can see UAS equal to platform. Essentially, this platform has to do with the payload, okay? Payload now has to do with what you want this drone to do, how you want it to work, how you want this drone to operate, in what circumstances and in what stance. And from there, you can also see GCS. GCS stands for Ground Control Systems. Okay, ground control systems are more like where you embed your data link into your drone, where you want this drone to go. You can tap it on the ground control system and it automatically takes on all these operations on behalf of the user itself. And that's where telemetry comes in. Going on to the next slide, I will also want here to highlight which UAS to use, because there are several use cases of UAS. I'm calling it UAS now because I'm migrating from drone to UAS, unmanned area system. Why which UAS to use? Because essentially, like I always say, drone is more or less like a one solution fit all. Okay, it can work for several purposes, several platforms, several deployment. But then there are different drones, and why you use this drone essentially is so you can get a resultant effect of the operation which you intend engaging on or which you intend taking on. For instance, for safe city operations, to make sure that yes, different emergency situations are tackled, there are different sets of drones that could be used in this situation. For perimeter control, in more like border control, border access management, and all this, you need drones with different payload, with different endurance level. When we talk of payload now, we're talking of which kind of camera. Are we looking at electro-optical camera? Are we looking at infrared camera? Are we looking at thermal camera? Are we looking at day and night camera? So the circumstances in which drones will be deployed also depends on the kind of payload that will be set up on this drone. So all these put together make up what we call the drone ecosystem. All this need to be put into consideration before even determining an ecosystem that will be built around a drone platform. Going forward, I would like to briefly talk about the classifications of drones. Okay, according to the NATO platform, operationally, as well as Interpol as well, there are 3 classes of drones. We have the hobbyist, consumer, stroke professional drones. They cut across because this drone ranges from 1 kg to from 0 to 150 kg. And as you can see by the left, these are classifications of this drone. Then you have class 2 drones, which are mostly industrial and commercial drones. Okay, industrial and commercial drones are drones that are deployable for maybe a large border control, for oil installation check, or for essentially even as far as security interception, reconnaissance, and interdiction. So these are basically different classes and ranges of drone. You can see the class 3 drones are drones that are very large in framework. These are some drones are as large as even the aircraft, that's the airliner craft. And that's where you talk about class 3 drone, which are over 600 kilograms. These drones could go close to 1,000 miles, and they could last as long as 48 hours in the air, okay, hovering and taking precision pictures, okay, and also other ordnance assignments as per requirement of the drones for defense and security. Now, I also want to run through a paradigm which Interpol has set up for its various law enforcement agency, especially in terms of integrating or embracing robust drone ecosystem usage for defense and security. Interpol has earmarked or set up a platform which is called the Interpol Drone Expert Forum. It's a yearly platform where drone experts from all Interpol member countries around the world comes or gathers at the Interpol Global Center for Innovation, that is Singapore, to discuss modalities, operabilities, and come up with global operational standards, procedures, and international best practices on how drones should be deployed, effectively for law enforcement use and for security purposes. And the core pillars of the Interpol drone paradigm is 1, using a drone as a tool for law enforcement agency, usage by industry organizations, implications, challenges, and limitations of using these tools, essentially how it will be integrated from the beginning, from the onset to the end, in terms of using these drones as a tool is essentially a key aspect. And Interpol has, in its database of drone platformation, come up with standard operating procedures and best practices and on how drones could be fully utilized by member countries as tools and as operable measures for curbing the heinous crime and criminalities within different regions. Drone also is more or less like an evidence gathering tool, essentially for forensic recovery of drone data. Interpol has also set up a standard operating procedures because Interpol in its last meeting found out that a lot of organizations or regulatory bodies or agencies that are in charge of drone deployment for many countries are more or less are not too clear on how this legality should be done. Because when there is drone incidents, there's usually an upheaval here and there. How do we recover this data? How do we know who flew this drone last? How do we know who registered this drone? How do we know the platform that this drone is being used, such that it could determine possibly an arrest of who the perpetrator of this drone usage is? So these are basically platform which is fully set up on the Interpol drone platform database hosted by Interpol, which is available for law enforcement agencies through the various NCBs around the world. We also have the threat, that is the countermeasures, detect and identify in terms of drone usage, because this has also been a major issue, especially looking at the proliferation of drones, the illicit or illegal use of drones by bandits, by terrorists, by state actors, and even at times by hobbyists who don't really know what they are doing. And this could cause a high magnitude of harm. As a result of this, Interpol has taken counter-drone, counter-UAV as one of its core pillars in terms of setting up and integrating the Interpol drone paradigm. Going forward, I would like to also talk about the Interpol drone paradigm, which talk about threats. Some threats associated with drones around the world. As you can see on the slide in front of you, this a case study which shows that ISIS has demonstrated expertise in fabricating its own weaponized drones and modifying commercial off-the-shelf UAS. ISIS, to a larger extent, also demonstrated capabilities in using both fixed wing and multi-rotor wings. This has been deployed. It has been seen in several use cases around the world. And then for law enforcement agency, defense and security to be at the peak of operations, then they need to know about these threats. They need to know how to mitigate this threat. And that is why Interpol drone paradigm is very, very essential for all law enforcement agencies, for defense and security sectors around the world to key into. Because it's a known fact that since 2014, ISIS has used UAS as part of its attacks. And apart from this, some other countries in the sub-Saharan Africa, countries also in Middle East and all the rest, there have been subsequent deployment of this by illegal organized criminal groups, as well as terrorists within this region. So the drone paradigm of Interpol has to be encouraged for this to be capped to the barest minimum. Let me quickly look at when we talk about using drone as a tool. This is where we say drone encompasses all. I'm still on the paradigm of the Interpol drone initiative. When we talk about using drone as a tool, drone as a panacea for curbing crime, drone as a humanitarian platform, that's where drone comes in. And at times, I begin to wonder if really drone can be used as a core tool and can be implemented for a lot of defense and security sector operations, then why the double dealing at times when even the regulatories at times who won't want to also give authorization to law enforcement agencies to utilize this platform? One, it's because they really don't know how to make use of it. They really don't know how to set up this platform. They don't know what the standard operating procedures is, or the international best practices. And resultantly, that's the reason why Interpol has set up this Interpol drone paradigm, has set up this database, has come up with expertise from around the globe to come up with this documentation, or with this database to help law enforcement agents to a larger extent. Then in terms of evidence gathering, drawn from the Interpol Drone Expert Forum, Interpol Drone Initiative, you found out that ISIS, this is an ISIS fighter posing with drone in Iraq. Then after an incident, subsequently the drone was counter-checked. It was a forensic analysis was done on the drone even after it was burnt. But then investigators were able to see that yes, this drone was flew at so-so date in so-so country with so-so platform of softwares and all this. So that's where the evidence platform of the Interpol Drone Initiative is very key, and that's where it comes in. And that's where we encourage on this platform, all members should also look deeply into establishing this kind of platform within her own region, especially for defense and security, to help in checkmating excesses within the drone platform. Well,
you have 2 minutes.
Yes. Okay. Well, lastly, I also want us to see look at Determinant to a robust drone ecosystem. First and foremost, there needs to be a food chain of support. That is the food chain, meaning detection, tracking, identification, engagement, and technical exploitation of this operation. Without this, then there's no way you can have a robust food chain or a robust platform, not only on technology, but then doctrine has to also be key to organizations. Training, materials, leadership, personnel to man these facilities and interoperabilities has to be at its peak. And this is what the drone initiative stand for. And these are some of the deliverables which can be acquired from keying into the Interpol drone platform or the Interpol drone initiatives for member countries. And these are pilots, first responders or crime scene, some factors that will also enable pilots to be very good and effective in deploying this operable platform, especially in setting up a robust ecosystem. Finally, education is very important in setting up this robust ecosystem. Education in the sense that drone training has to be onboarded from onset, even before acquiring this capability. Officers need to be trained either via simulator, intensive courses. And the good thing is that for drone, any level of entry, you can also pick it up from there and get the best. This is a schema which you can look at. I'm sure after this conference, this documentation or this slide will be shared. So I also want us to look at this schema carefully. Because of time, I won't be able to break through this one after the other. But I think I'll leave my email address and my details at the end so we can also talk. This is a use case of drone in Nigeria during the Interpol operation, which is codenamed Operation 30 Days at Sea, where drone was used for an unprecedented port scanning, where drone flew up to 5,000 miles, 5,000 nautical miles into the sea level and did some imagery. And we have to view this from the command and control center and all that. Though I have a little video, but then because of time, I don't know if Sarah will want to play this briefly. Thank you very much for your rapt attention. And I also hope to get questionnaires from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry.
Like 2,000 feet, it can go up to 5,000 feet, depending on the kind of operations. If you want to make it very, very covert, you can send it as far as 1,000 meters above sea levels, and it can go up to the 200 or 500 nautical miles, depending on the deployment of the drone. And from here, from that distance, you can zoom in on any boat and see what is actually happening at that distance. So if need be that you have to send your men there instantaneously, then you can deploy men there. So in that case, you spend less on manpower, you spend less on fueling, you spend less on patrol. So that's essentially the use case of drone for integration into this operation. This is what we call survey. Survey is different from surveillance. Survey is such that it goes around the area. You map a particular area for the essence of stitching the photo together and having it in your command and control, such that anytime you want to go for subsequent or similar assignment, you can still go, let's say 2-week intervals, you can do a remapping to be sure everywhere is as it's supposed to and all that. So it's mapping the whole coastal environs.
Can you explain that of surveillance?
Okay, Surveillance essentially is in the sense that, for instance, you have something happening like 1 kilometer, 2 kilometers, or 3 kilometers from there. What you do, you don't survey, because survey takes pictures. Like this one is taking close to like 218 pictures, which will be stitched together. But surveillance goes directly to the target. From your command and control, you can be controlling it. If you get to any target and you want to zoom in to know what's really happening there, because you have different payloads in terms of camera. You have the thermal camera, which can essentially check a boat and know how long the boat has been stationed there, because it checks the heat sensor of a particular boat to know how long it's been stationed there. You can zoom in to know what's really in the boat or what's on the boat and all that, to know if there's any illegalities. Then from your command and control center, you are getting a direct signal and know what to do. If you want it to go ahead or to come back, or if you want to radio augment there.
Yeah, so now I will move on to Christian's presentation.
Sarah, first of all, many thanks for inviting us to talk on this particular topics at this large forum. I see we have participants from all over the world, which is really important for us, and in the sense that we are allowed to share our development in this area. So my presentation, also a presentation from a multinational organization, although not so large as Interpol, and Jerry mentioned 194 nations there. For NATO, we are a bit smaller, only 30 nations at the moment. Still a lot of coordination that has to go on, and from an institution perspective, it's very important to get this coordination right, so then we get this multiplication effect between all the participating nations here. So my presentation today is going to cover the unmanned aircraft system, and in particular Class 1 and countering those unmanned systems. So in the previous presentation from Jerry, you have seen that drones have a lot of utilities, and particularly in this COVID situation that we all struggle with, we see the need for drone increasing. However, from defense and security perspective, we can see that this also opens some security risks. So then we have to address them in time and make sure that we are not getting into a difficult situation when it comes to our protection. Now, so my presentation today, I have number of slides that I put together. Those slides will be available to the people to review after the meeting. And the presentation is organized, basically, I will start with the short introduction just to explain to you some basic terminology and why NATO is looking into this area. Then I will give you a short overview of how NATO has organized the entire country-yes effort. And then I have 3 practical examples of results that we have obtained so far in NATO that covers the handbook that we have developed, some interoperability work that we are doing, and a research and development center that we are trying to establish in NATO. So our mandate in NATO was given by the member nations at the summit in 2019, when unmanned aircraft system vehicles have been identified as a new challenge for a security perspective. And during the same summit, there was another point in the declaration which has to do with the terrorist misuse of technology. So we have seen that drones and unmanned aircraft system, they have a lot of useful application. However, given the cost of those devices and the easy to train and operate, they also used by in terrorist scopes. So then during this summit, we said, okay, we have to do something about it. And then we started with our activities in NATO. And I'm going to go into more details into the next section. But for the moment, I just want to introduce a bit the terminology that we use in NATO. So you have seen in Jerry's presentation this Class 1, Class 2, Class 3 organization. This is very important for us because based on the classification of the drone, we can separate role and responsibility inside of NATO between various organization and defense units. So for us, country yes, it's restricted to class 1 drones, which are, or let's say, unmanned aircraft system, which are classified based on the weight, but you can also see some mode of employment, typical mode of employment presented in this table. Okay, so now moving into what we are, how we organize ourselves internally. So first of all, we have received a political guidance at the NATO level. As many of you know, NATO is first a political organization and then a military organization. So for us, it's very important to have this clear guidance from the nations before we developing any capabilities. So this guidance was provided through the practical framework that we have approved in NATO. And this framework is tasking NATO to advance the design and development test country-as capability through the whole DOTML PFI spectrum. And DOTML PFI is the abbreviation that Jerry also used in his presentation. It covers the doctrine, organization, training, material, leadership, and so on and so forth. And basically what we try to do through this practical framework is to ensure that we have a coherent and synchronized activity. You can imagine that many existing groups inside of NATO, they start looking into the country yes domain for various perspectives, from identification, from air defense, for force protection. And that was needed to have this coherent element that will bring all the elements together. Our approach is split on 3 pillars. We talk about people, processes, and technologies. And well, we have a plan for the first 24 months where we will concentrate on building the country yes committee, develop some policy documents and standards, and we'll start looking into the research, development, and operation. The second element that we have produced as part of our internal organization of this area is to develop a program of work. And we developed this program of work in 2019. We started in September 2019 with the implementation of this program of work. 3 phases. In the first phase was just we identify what are the capability gaps, and then we derive requirements from these gaps, and then later on we started last year with the implementation of the project. So with the implementation of the project, a program of work. So later on I'm going to share with you some of the results that we have so far since September last year. The third element that we have in NATO to cover this country as domain is to establish a working group. So nations are represented in this working group, and this group is chaired by the NATO headquarters. And what's important to note here is that NATO placed the country as a problem under the Air and Missile Defense Committee. So basically we see this as a air defense problem, but other committees such as force protection are definitely taking part in this air defense task. We meet quarterly, and we have a number of workshops that we run over the year. And here is the example of a workshop that we had in 2019, in one in Italy, in Rome, and the other one in Spain, in Madrid. Now, moving now into some of the results, this NATO country's handbook is one of the documents that we have developed so far. In this document, we are providing operational and strategic level guidance to NATO commanders to conduct operation at expeditionary, civil, military, and host nation operation. So basically, from a NATO perspective, we see 3 main use cases. When we talk expeditionary, that's something similar to we'll see when NATO nations are going into a mission somewhere abroad. Civil military is more the cooperation, cover the cooperation with law enforcement agencies. And then for the host nation, it's basically when you have national units or units deployed on a NATO country. The intended audience is for the NATO mission commanders, and basically will provide some planning guidance to the commanders on how to organize the mission now. So this document was approved a couple of weeks ago, so it's a fresh document we are start using now. So also in the document, an element that we put inside was to define the threat environment. And in this particular case, we defined the threat environment using scenario base. We have about 10, 12 scenarios that we have defined inside of this handbook. So one example is the use of UAS for the ISR. And this is a picture of how a drone can be used for reconnaissance. So then we have to be agnostic of this potential threat when we move into a certain area of operation. The strategic and operational guidance is also included in the document. On this part, I will just highlight that at the strategic level, we see this as the country has problem as a joint combined arms solution, and that requires integration of capability across all domains. And again, this is a whole of a government approach where it involves military, law organization, and all organization, civil organization to cooperate to keep the problem under control and minimize the security risk. At the operational level, we have this planning consideration, and we use a NATO Comprehensive Operational Planning Directive that we use. The planning guidance that we include in the document is relatively flexible and can be applied depending on the existing national capabilities. So you can imagine some of the nation may have radars or other sensors and effectors that they can use to counter drones. Others may only define this at the human level and observers and whatever they have in the at the national level. But this planning, it's adaptable at various levels. And then protection model is something that we have defined in the handbook, and we look at these protection models as four phases. We look at the prevent phase. There is a situational awareness phase where we cover most of the sensor elements. And then there is a response part when we place the effectors, and also a post-event area where we exploit and make sure that we can close the cycle and then go back into the prevention based on what we learn from the exploitation. Another achievement that we have so far is in the area of interoperability. So interoperability is very important for NATO. In particular, this will allow to reduce the number of required personnel, provide a better data transmission, and increase speed of operation. So this is a permanent concern for NATO to make sure that we have a good interoperability in any operation that we are doing. We look at the interoperability at 3 levels. It's not only technical, but we also look at operational level when the people have to talk to each other, and also at the architecture level. And at the moment, we have these standardization agreements in NATO. We have more than 1,000 standardization agreements that are used in, to make sure that the 30 nations that we have in NATO can efficiently operate with each other and interact with each other. From an architecture perspective, a very simple view that we are considering at the moment to define this interface requirements, interface exchange requirements. So sensors, command and control, and effectors. And then at each of these interfaces, we intend to define the data exchange format. So this is just country S capability represented here, but we also see external information exchanging interfaces or requirements, where we can communicate with other communities and can contribute, for example, to build the common operating picture with the air traffic controller or other entities in a certain area. For the standards, our approach is to adopt, reuse, and develop. So we look at a number of industry standards. I listed a number of them here. And those are standards that cover sensor data, cooperative and non-cooperative detection. And also we look at the unmanned traffic management and hope that such a system will be soon operational. So then we can separate between drones that can fly legally and drones that are not supposed to fly in a certain area. And we also have a number of internal NATO standards that we intend to reuse in this for this purpose. CDARTS is a research and development center that I'm leading at the moment inside of the agency, trying to get this off the ground with support from the nation. And in particular, we look at this as a gateway to communicate with academia, industry, research and development institutions. So basically, through this center of expertise, we try to assist NATO commands and nations to advance counter-UAS technologies. And our research and experimental research activities are very practical, and we try to complement them all the time with live demonstration and rapid assessment of the potential new areas. So we have now running a cognitive radar project that will, and in this one we will conduct a measurement campaign in September this year. Hopefully we'll be allowed to travel, and all the participants will be allowed to travel. And through this measurement campaign, we will collect a number of radar, radio frequency signals, and then we establish a reference data set. That data set will be made available to the nations to further expand advanced detection methods. Artemis is another prototype that we have developed by the agency. This is using software-defined radio. And then with this software-defined radio, we are able to identify drones. Basically, this is an example of the user interface when we scan the entire Wi-Fi band on 2.4 gigahertz. Then we use some classifiers, some features of the signal to establish the drones, which drones are flying in, controllers using a certain area. And then the third event that we have planned for in the CDARTS is a technical interoperability exercise in 2020. And for this exercise, we will organize an initial planning conference in November at NCA in The Hague. So this technical interoperability exercise is yet another example how we can, why we have to be pragmatic when it comes to the standards. It's not only to define those standards, because those definitions often leave room to interpretation. And when you go down to the implementation level, you will see often that two teams implementing the same specification, they can still not talk to each other, and they have to physically meet or virtually meet and discuss the implementation problem. So this is what we are trying to address with the technical interoperability exercise. So coming to the conclusion of this presentation, I just want to highlight that Class 1 unmanned aircraft system have been recognized as a potential threat to NATO missions and operation. And from a NATO perspective, we look at addressing this problem at the joint combined arms solution with integrated capability across all domains, and also cooperating with other governmental and non-governmental organizations. The CDARTS is the NATO gateway for cooperation with industry, academia, and research and development establishment. And we will be using this center at NCIA to further advance and test potential ideas for the counter-UAS domain. So with this, I conclude my presentation. Sarah, how I'm doing with the time? Do we still have time for the question? Or?
Thank you, Christian. Yes, thank you so much for adhering to the time. So now we shall move on to our question and answer session. Jerry, can I have you back on screen?
Sure.
Yes, so we do have quite a few questions from the audience. I'm going to start with Jerry. I think this question is for you from Akene. He is asking, how have you ever integrated US data with LiDAR and satellite imagery data in your security operation?
Yes, that's a very wonderful question by I think what's the name?
Name was Furobi Akine.
Yes,
my pronunciation, I'm so sorry, but yes.
That's a wonderful question. And essentially, if you look at some of my documentation, even my last discourse at Singapore, I actually talked about integration of drone with remote sensing apparatus. And once we talk about remote sensing apparatus, that means satellite integration and other sensing mechanism. And for Nigeria, presently, the deployment we've done most of the times are in remote locations, especially locations that it's hard to always go there because it's not motorable, it's not accessible. So most times we use satellite technology as well, okay? And you know, satellite has what we call there's a satellite. I'm trying to figure out, but then it's quite that's the ultimate solution for now, integrating the satellite and your UAV solution. And all this can also be monitored from a remote command and control center, such that you can look at all these different informations at there, and you can program your response towards it as well. Thank you.
Right, okay. The rest of other questions are mainly talking about civilian usage of drones. So how involved do you think a security agency like Interpol or like NATO, how much should they be involved in the regulating the usage of drones for civilian application? Maybe Christian, do you have any thoughts on that?
So the question was about how we can use the drones
for civilian application.
In civil application, yeah.
Yeah, how much involvement should the law enforcement agency or security agency should involve in regulating the usage of drones in civilian application?
From what we have seen, at least in Europe, it's more a problem of air traffic controller agencies to define how the drones can be integrated in the overall air traffic controller part. I think the law enforcement agencies and in general agencies, they will just follow the implementation of all those regulations. So once the regulations are approved at the national level, then the role of the law enforcement is clearly defined. So that's a not surprise. We cannot say that they have to be more or less involved, and the law will ask to do that. Yeah.
Right. And Jerry, any example from Nigeria? What kind of regulation is there for civilian application?
Yeah, absolutely. Just like Christian just mentioned, every country has its own regulatories as well. And like in Nigeria, there are different sets of regulatory. We have at the national level, which is the National Civil Aviation Authority. They are in charge of reviewing the regulatories of unmanned aviation, unmanned usage of drone, especially for civilians, even for the security agencies. Then we also have at the national level, the Office of the National Security Advisor. These people also give authorization. So it's like a joint effort between the regulatories for civilian and the law enforcement, so that there could be sort of like a balanced format for using these drone services. Because in most cases, it's termed, it's looked at from the perspective of a weapon. So essentially, it is very well guided and heavily regulated within the industry.
Okay. So I read one article over here in Malaysian ecosystem that there is a certain concern that most of the drones are manufactured outside of Malaysia, like it's not manufactured locally. So do you find this an issue over there, whether in Europe or in Africa as well, Christian? In terms of cybersecurity and everything?
Yeah, so there was one aspect that I didn't address in my presentation, and that was the legal aspect of the country as problem. Because Even though those regulations exist, there are still restrictions of what the government can do when protecting against those drones. So then, in addition to this countermeasure that you normally see for use jammers, even the use of jammers has to be controlled by the government, because we inadvertently can jam an airplane, so you don't want to do that. And also there are some other solutions when you try to take control over the drone, but there is a number of legal questions that are raised in that problem. So the legal aspect of countering the drone, it's still an important problem. And at least for NATO, it's still under investigation. We don't have a clear answer, and then probably our approach will be to follow the national regulations.
And Jerry, there is one question from Anand Petia. What are your views on video analytics using drones for real-time data streaming?
Yeah, again, it has to do with the data link. Video analytics, in most cases, has to do with analyzing video feeds from a drone. And there are different ways of doing it. You can have a real-time video analytics, and this will be an integration with AI, that's artificial intelligence, that will automatically give you the factors which you are looking from at that video. Again, I said this is sequel to the data, the level of data streaming you are doing. If you have a good data package or a good bandwidth, then you can do it very well. And if you have a good bandwidth and you have a good AI platform to auto do this, then automatically you can do this real time. But in cases whereby you don't have good bandwidth, that means you have to do it. You need to get it stored then before you can have this run on the platform.
Right, right. There is one question from Prakash. How important is ground intelligence in deciding the flight plans? Jerry,
So,
can
shall
you
I
hear
start
me?
this question then, Sarah?
Oh, yeah, yes, Christian.
Yeah, I can hear.
Okay, yes, Christian, go ahead.
And now, so we have seen there are different navigation methods that are applied from drones, and from remote operator when you provide the controls, GPS when it's waypoint navigation. You also have this autonomous navigation, and then you see now even the previous question that suggested the video analytic, when you have drone equipped with I don't know, NVIDIA GPUs that can sense where they are, and then can navigate without any GPS, without any control. And that makes them very difficult to counter them. And from the planning perspective and route planning perspective, you see now artificial intelligence and video analytic, they go hand in hand there, where you say, I want to go into that area, and you provide some training data with various buildings or terrain area, and then the drone can just follow the terrain using this video analytics. So I think the intelligence and using artificial intelligence planning is definitely something that it's important for artificial intelligence. And also when you talk about beyond line of sight operating, and Jerry has been touching upon that a couple of times today, and also the topic of bandwidth, when you see I want to control a drone using the 5G technology at a very long distance. So then you run into all these issues when you say, okay, so I want to push this AI to the edge where the drone can decide for itself what it's supposed to do without using bandwidth, without using the operator attention.
Now, would you like to add anything in terms of ground intelligence in planning the flight plan?
Yeah, absolutely. Just in addition to what Chris just said, for deployment, I'm talking from the use case of Nigeria and what we have.
There seems to be a bandwidth issue with Jerry. Let me see if you have other questions from the audience. There is one question for Christian about the standardization agreement, but I think you touched upon that already.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, Jerry has left. So maybe Christian would like to give a little bit of closure in terms of what where the drones is going in security, defense and security ecosystem, and maybe how drones can still benefit the civilian as well, because there seems to be a lot of distrust with the technology right now. So what do you think the role of the Defense and Security Agency can play in this regard?
Yeah, so thank you, Sarah. And indeed, this trend that I observe here in Europe as well. So the past 5 years, the drones were very popular around Europe, and many hobbyists get access to them. I see today there is more concern regarding the regulation. There are a lot of restrictions that are imposed by the governments on how the drone can be used. And those are all valid, because we have seen incidents in airports and also at various events where the drones were used not in the best way, even if it was accidental. So from that perspective, I think the drone committee needs a better guidance on what's allowed and what's not allowed. And that's definitely a role that government agencies and international organizations should play in that area. And it's evident for us that we cannot live without drone, and we have to balance the restriction that we put on those drones with the benefit that we get from those drones. So hopefully, with the effort from various communities, we can reach that balanced ecosystem where hobbyists can still fly drones in certain area without crashing or keeping airplanes at the ground on airports.
Right.
So over to you.
Welcome back, Jerry. I got a bit flustered when you left. So I was asking Christian, what kind of role do you think a security and international agency can play to bring to reduce the mistrust or distrust against drones technology among the community?
Okay, just like Chris just said, drone has come to stay, and essentially, like the popular saying that with time, unmanned drone will replace manned aircraft and all that. So for international agency security or platformation to encourage usage of drone, especially at the country level, one of the models which I always like talking about, I'm an evangelist of that model, which is the Interpol drone initiative. This is an initiative to encourage member countries to embrace a drone in a very clean, eco-systematic way by looking at drones from 3 critical points of view, which is drone as a tool, okay, drone as a threat, and drone as a platform where evidence could also be gathered from. So for me, I encourage members on this platform to also see how from their respective country can key into this drone platformation. Because like for we in Nigeria here now, we have escalated these and we're working with the regulatories to an extent to see how we can have like a standard resolution or resolve. Like I can see a question on the screen here by Chukudi Sierras, who said, what are the steps commercial companies need to take to get a clearance for operations? And that is a wonderful question, because it's been a lot hectic getting clearance. And the reason being that there is no dedicated platform that is set up whereby if you need to fly a drone, if you are already authorized, if you are an authorized user or a pilot or an...
Okay. We lost both of our speakers. I think it's probably time to close this session now. But I promised Jerry that I will play his video as we close. So thank you so much for being here with us. And this session is recorded, so you will receive the recording link in your email tomorrow. So thank you all.